Hi guys, it's Olivia again. Nice to see you all. Today we're going to be talking about in this second voice thread, essentially comparing first language acquisition versus second language learning and the differences between those. The first guiding question was based on what you've read about first language, L1 acquisition, and second language learning, what are some of the skills that students can transfer from their L1 as they learn English as a second language? And I really like this question, and it reminded me of when I started learning. I guess I'm not fluent by any means, but the first language that I ever tried to learn outside of English, which was French in high school. I took French all through high school and through college. And my French teacher, I just wanted to talk about her for a little bit because I think her strategies of learning a second language were actually super helpful and something that I would encourage people doing when they're learning English as a second language, regardless of what age they are. Because I was 15 or 16 when I first took her class, and Madame Brogan, my French teacher, she was not a French educator. That was not what her degree was in. She was not a language educator. She had her degree from Notre Dame. Convenient timing considering the Arkansas Notre Dame game coming up. But she had her degree in elementary education, just plain elementary education. And she fell in love with a man who lived in the French-speaking part of Switzerland and then moved to Switzerland. And so she learned French by living there for years. And then she came back to America and she used her tactics that she had learned as an elementary educator to teach her students French. So we were often doing things that you would see students do in a kindergarten classroom, in a first grade classroom. We were reading children's books that were French. We put aside any bias of, oh, I'm old, I'm not going to do these things. That's lame, and learned like kindergartners learn. And it really helped not being thrown into the deep end. And in fact, when I got to college and started taking French, I almost feel like I lost some knowledge on the language because I was not picking up where I started. I was not learning like an elementary schooler anymore. I was learning like an upper level college student, and that jump was just a lot for me. So I think that is a tactic, and when we were talking about first language acquisition, we talked about all those small steps that children have to take to learn a language. And I think any age English learner should start there. They should start with the bare minimum kindergarten, early childhood levels of English and learn the way that children do, because there's a reason we start there. So yeah, that was my experience for the first question. And the second one, what differences do you see in how children versus adults learn a second language? I'm going to start there. The first thing that caught my eye when we were learning about this in our readings this week was the idea of interlanguage, and that idea that when you are an adult learning a second language, you sort of make up your own version of the language in your head, which I found very fascinating, because obviously you don't do that when you're a child because you're not processing the language compared to something you already know. You're not comparing your second language to your first language. You're like a sponge and you're absorbing all of this stuff, and there's nothing to compare it to because you are so young, and everything you're learning for the first time. So I found the idea of interlanguage very interesting, and I found myself comparing this concept to when I was learning French, and how it's very accurate that you create this sort of second language as a combination of both your first and second language. So I found that very fascinating. That was like the big difference that I thought was really cool. And do you think there's a cutoff age for learning a new language? Now, I think that's a really fascinating question because I don't think there's ever a cutoff age for learning anything. And if I did think that, I feel like I'd be an awful educator. There's never a cutoff for anyone learning anything, but there, of course, is a time period, and we're learning about this, and we learned about this heavily during first language acquisition. There's a time period where you learn better, where you absorb information better. But the age of onset acquisition, which is something we also learned about, how early or late in life one should start learning an additional language to your mother tongue. I think while there's a should, I don't think that there should be a cutoff. There's no like, this is where it stops. So yeah, I hope you guys have a great week.